Hey friends, so this video is for the early money monkers that may have never invested before. And my goal in this video is for you to understand exactly what you need to do to start actually investing. We're not going to get into specific investments to choose in this video, but what I am going to focus on are how to understand your brokerages, the accounts, and then setting up for actually making your first investment. And I've actually built a checklist that you can follow along with this video on. It's free on my website. My goal is to help, without any jargon, simplify exactly what you need to do to start building wealth. Because the truth is that investing has never been more accessible for anyone than it ever has been. There are options for no fee trading, no fees on your accounts, being able to invest with as little as $1. And you can invest in ways that 50 years ago, you would have to pay someone a lot of money to do. And if you watch this video to the end, really by the end of it, and if you follow along on the checklist, you could really be invested in under 30 minutes from the time you open an account to the time you set up the different accounts that we're going to talk about. If you can create a Netflix account and just do basically anything that we do in our modern day, you can be an investor. So my goal here is, don't feel intimidated if you're an absolute beginner, and don't get distracted by all the jargon. Let's jump in. I'm going to go through a presentation that I built for you. Okay, so again, this is laying the foundation. So I want to simplify the actual setup of accounts as your foundation and help you kind of understand the difference between, your 401k versus a Roth IRA versus these brokerage accounts that we talk about. And I want to do it in a simple analogy that makes a lot of sense to me, so I hope it makes sense to you. But imagine if you are a gardener. Now, I'm not a gardener, but you probably have a green thumb yourself. Any plant I touch, I kill. But imagine that you're a gardener. So, one of the first things that you might have when you're a gardener is something like a raised garden bed. And so you can think about a raised garden bed as those things that are outdoors that are those big steel bins. And I have a picture here of a garden bed. Well, that is like your brokerage account. And so it just basically holds everything that's inside of your garden. And so it's just a box for to hold things. And so your brokerage could be Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Acorns, Robinhood. And I'm going to go through some different options and what I consider when I'm choosing a brokerage. But the key is don't get overwhelmed because you have a lot of options with brokerages. It's just a box. Okay, so then what goes inside your raised garden bed? Well, that's going to be the different buckets of accounts that you can have. And if you've ever bought a plant from like Home Depot or Lowe's, you see that they're in these little black containers. So think about your accounts like those buckets. Well, what are these buckets? They could be accounts like your retirement account. So that could be a 401k. It could be a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, or non retirement accounts. So don't get overwhelmed by the different names of these accounts. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different buckets that you should have. But really just think about these things as holding your investments, your 401k, your IRA, your taxable account. These are just buckets that sit inside the garden bed, which is your brokerage account. All right. And then so one level up from there, what goes inside your buckets? Well, what goes inside your garden? These are the investments that are growing in the buckets of soil that you have. So when you hear things like dividends or stocks or bonds or all of these different things, these are different forms of investments that go inside of your accounts. One really important thing to note is just because you open your buckets here, so like let's say you open your 401k and you put money into it, or you open an IRA and you put money into it, it's not invested yet. So that would be like you have a bucket of soil and you haven't put any seeds in there to let your plants grow. And so what we want is to be able to set this foundation. You're going to create your garden bed, you're going to figure out the buckets that you want inside of that garden bed, and then you're going to plant the seeds of your investments. So if you're a gardener, what do you need to grow your investments? You need sunlight and water. So just like that, for your investments, you need time. So if you haven't watched my video on compound interest, I'll try to put it up in a link somewhere over here. And you can watch and kind of start to understand how important time is for your investments, because it takes a lot of time for money to grow on itself. And so the earlier you start, the better. Well, the other thing that you need, just like water for your plants, is money. So we're going to talk about, you have to be consistent with the contributions that you're making towards your investments. And just like, a garden seed, it doesn't feel like your investments are growing as you're watering them and you're waiting and the time. But if you give it enough time, you're going to start to see those sprouting And it's pretty incredible once you see things that start growing faster than you could have imagined. And so that's really what investing is at the end of the day. So, what we're going to do now is go over to the checklist that I built that talks a little bit about what you're going to do with the rest of this video. Okay, so I didn't have room to put my face anywhere on this, but this is the checklist that's on my website. So if you go there, you can follow along with this. You can print this out as a PDF and just check these things. What we're going to talk about is what you look for with a brokerage, and then you're going to choose one. And then you're going to look at which accounts you might want to open inside of the brokerage. Again, these are the accounts that you have are the buckets that go inside of your garden bed. And then in a future video, I'm going to talk about the investments, but it's a bigger discussion and I don't want to overwhelm you. So we're just going to focus on getting your foundation set at this point. One thing I will call out is that I'm not your financial advisor. So please understand, if you are new to investing, that investing does carry risk. You can lose money. And honestly, the way a lot of people talk about investing, it's more similar to gambling. For the people that are gambling in the stock market, you can lose all of your money. So I'm going to talk about risk in a future video and choosing the right investments that aligns with kind of what your goals are. But do know that it carries risk. So please treat this video and any other financial video that you see from anyone else as educational information that you can help inform your own situation. But always make the decision about your own plan for yourself based on what's best for you. Okay, so we're on step one, and we're going to talk about a brokerage. So, like I said in the beginning of the video, don't get overwhelmed by choices. Most of these all do the same thing. They can all be set up in as little as 5 to 10 minutes. Doesn't matter what your credit score is, doesn't matter your history, doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. Okay, so we're going to talk about what I consider when I'm looking at a brokerage. What investment options can I hold at the brokerage? So in this box analogy, what plants can I put inside of my garden box? So there's some restrictions at some of the newer companies. They don't allow mutual funds. I'm not going to get into the difference between mutual funds and ETFs. If you're brand new, those words are just jargon. But you have to consider, are you going to be an active investor, which means you're trying to trade, and you're buying stocks, you're selling stocks, and you're being very active in the market versus passive. And I am very much a passive investor. If you watch some of my other videos around not timing the market, again, I'll link that. If you watch my educational material, I'll be on the passive side. So again, you do you. I'm just going to give you my perspective. But the important thing is that you choose the brokerage that maybe best supports how you plan to invest. Then the next thing is automation. So you want to think about your investments and your finances as a system. And there's so much complexity in life. Investing should not be complex. You want to take as much complexity out of the equation as possible. I don't like to have a lot of accounts. You just only really need a few. And the easier you can make it on yourself to manage your finances, the better. So think about it like decluttering a house. You don't want a bunch of clutter all around you, clouding what you need to do. We want to look at how can I auto invest my money so that if I get paid, then I immediately auto invest money into the stocks or whatever investments I'm interested in. Dividend reinvestment. What a dividend is basically income. A company will pay you an income for buying their stock. One of the important things is that if you have an investment that pays a dividend, that there is an option to automatically reinvest that money back into the investment. What you don't want, early on at least, is that turning into income that, one, you pay taxes on that you have no need for the income, and two, that you're continuing to invest. And then the last part is, does it have robo investing? This might be important for you or it might not. It is an algorithm where you answer questions about who you are, why you're investing, what your goals are, and it's going to recommend different portfolios to you to really simplify the investing process. I do think that it could be a great tool for beginners to get started building wealth while getting into investments that are sound and they make sense for your situation. So if you're a beginner and you don't understand everything yet, I think robo investing could be a great way to start investing. All right, the next thing I look for are fees and requirements. You're going to pay fees when you buy your investments. So what we don't want is to pay extra fees for just management of your garden box. So I look for things like, are there monthly fees? If there's monthly fees, I look for ways to avoid them. Preferably, I'll just pick an account or a brokerage that doesn't have them. You might also look at, sometimes accounts have minimum balance requirements. So if you're brand new and you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of money yet, you might be restricted on what you can invest in, that type of thing. So I like accounts that don't have a balance requirement. So it's open for all. It's more democratic in my mind. And then lastly, you do want to look at fees to leave. So for instance, Robinhood has fees for leaving them when you transfer money to a different garden box. And so you might want to look at, is this a brokerage that I want to stay with long term? So the next one is, are there advantages for you to use this garden box for more than just your investments? And that's what I call ecosystem benefits. So, for instance, Fidelity, Robinhood, a lot of the newer brokerages, they are trying to get you to do more stuff with them. And so, if you like the brokerage you're at, sometimes you can do more with them and you get more rewards. So, for instance, Robinhood, you buy their Robinhood Gold, they give you a 3% cashback credit card. They give you a high yield savings account, and then they unlock different features for trading. So, like that could be an option of an ecosystem. So, the next thing are services and features. So, does it do more than investing? Does it do banking? This is a great thing for me with Fidelity because I bank with Fidelity and it allows me to move money easily from my cash accounts to my investment accounts. It just simplifies the process. So the last one is most important, security. How does this brokerage protect your money? So you can look at, history of security breaches, the history of how long they've been in business, how much money they manage. So for that, I like to look at the older brokerages that have been around a long time. And so which do you choose? So if you follow along with my checklist, I list a few at the bottom here: Fidelity, Robinhood, Vanguard, M1 Finance, Charles Schwab, Acorns. My go-to is Fidelity, and that's just because I've been with them for 10 years and I've been able to build wealth with them, and they always have the features available that I need. And it's just kind of a seamless thing. But if you're not comfortable with Fidelity, Vanguard is another one. I really like Vanguard. They are kind of like the OGs of investing and bringing quality investing to everyone. And so they have incredible funds. I would say they're kind of like the old wooden ship of brokerages. So, you might not get the best UI experience. And so there's been complaints about that, but they are stable. They're one of the largest, oldest brokerages in the country. So they're great. Robinhood is a newer contender. Charles Schwab is another one of the big three: Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab, that you could go with. M1 Finance. I'm going to do a video on M1 Finance because I think their robo investing is really interesting, and I think they simplify a lot for you, even though they have an account fee. So M1 Finance could be an option. I like Acorns over Robinhood because while they both have a fee, I think that Acorns is more targeted to educating new investors in sound investing practices. And so I like that. Robinhood is also democratizing investing, but they encourage you to be a more active investor. There's pros and cons to that, but they do have a very rich ecosystem. But my go-to is Fidelity or Vanguard. Again, these are all just garden boxes, so don't overthink your decision here. The one thing I would look at is, what are the fees to leave your broker? So if you aren't sure and you just want to test one out, just make sure that they're not going to charge you a fee for transferring your money out. All right, so now we're going to talk about what buckets go into your garden box after you've opened up your account. I want to talk a little bit about these buckets because people get really confused, and there's so much stuff out there around, which account's best, what should you have. And so I want to teach you kind of how to think about it so you can treat yourself how to fish on these things. Your retirement accounts are really just like a regular brokerage account, which is just an account that you can invest in with any money that you have sitting around in a checking account. But they give you certain tax benefits for putting money into them. And when you do that, you make a trade off. With a lot of these accounts, you get a tax benefit for putting money into them. So the government will not tax you as heavily, or they'll allow your investments to grow without getting taxed. But it comes with a trade off. So typically, the trade off in this case is, the more restriction that you have, the more tax incentive you have to invest in those accounts. The less restriction you have, and again, restriction is, when can I access my money, the less tax incentive you're going to have. And so there's a few things with this. The goals are, don't focus on just one. So we want to look at, how can we invest in multiple buckets so that we can grow a bigger garden? Some things I see with people are, they might just say, well, I have a retirement account. Well, there's multiple types of retirement accounts, and we want to try to grow as many of them as we can. Just like you're trying to grow a big garden, there's multiple ones that you can invest in, all of which have different benefits that you should think about. Don't worry too much about taxes. So another common issue I see with especially newer wealth builders is they really care about taxes. They don't want the government to tax them. But taxes a lot of times are like a paper cut that you'll cut your arm off to avoid. So a lot of times a tax is really just on profit that you've made. So if you have profit, you're already winning. And so the goal is, how do we minimize as much taxes as we have, but don't do things that are bad for you just to not pay tax. All right. And then the next thing is, don't worry so much about the restrictions on these accounts that give you more money for investing in them. Because if you have 10, 20, or 30 or more years to build wealth, the restrictions on when you can access your money don't really apply to you. And there's so many workarounds to be able to access your money early. So, I early retired. It doesn't mean I can't touch my investment accounts until I'm 60 years old. I can access them now. And there's a lot of ways to get around that. So don't worry about restrictions too much as you're getting closer to retirement. Obviously, retirement planning is critical, and there's a lot that goes into that. But again, this is just laying the foundation. So here's what you do want to focus on. You want to focus on, how do I take advantage of all of the different tax incentives so that I am keeping more of my money every single year to save and invest. The other thing you want to focus on are, how can I take advantage of free money? So many times, an employer will give you free money for investing in yourself, especially with a 401k. And so you don't want to leave money on the table that's free just for building wealth. The other goal is to try to max annual limits every single year. Now, this is a hard goal because the limits can be pretty high, and we'll get into that in a minute, but it can be a challenge for yourself. So, let's say you're training for a marathon. You might not be able to run 26 miles right now. Maybe you can only run a mile, but they can be aspirational targets for you. So, just realize how much money can be invested so that you know kind of where you're at. And then you can build plans to get even better as you start focusing on how to earn more money or save more money and get really excited about investing. Last thing is, you do need a plan for when you need to access money. So what you don't want to do is, let's say you're just starting out and you put money into an investment or a retirement account that you can't access for 5 years, and then you have an emergency, and then you're having to pull money out of it, and you're getting hit with fees and other things. So you have to be thoughtful and have a plan around when you need to access the money. But if you're investing for a long time horizon, then all of these investment accounts are great ways to build wealth. Okay, so before I get into which accounts to focus on, one of the things that anyone needs to understand is what dollars you use to fill these buckets. And so, again, going back to the garden analogy, we talked about how you need time and you need to water your plants with money. And so the question is, what dollars do you use to fill your buckets? And there's two options for this. And so you'll hear terms called before tax or after tax. And I want to walk you through a scenario. So Beth is interested in how to water her investments in her garden. And Beth unfortunately works for E Corp, and she's interested in, how can I stop working for E Corp and eventually build wealth so that I can escape my 9 to 5 job. Well, there's two ways to fill or to water these gardens, and I'm going to walk you through both. So she's interested in, how do I give money in my plants? So we're going to talk about the first one. So the first one is, E Corp pays her money. Let's say she gets paid every month. And so she gets this paycheck, and then she could take that money from her paycheck and move money into her brokerage. What happens every time she gets paid? There is income tax. And so income tax is the government taxing you for the money you make. So what this is called are after tax dollars, because it's after the income tax that you pay on your paycheck. So the cool thing about after tax dollars is that you have a lot of flexibility with them because you've already paid tax. It's your money. You can do whatever you want with it whenever you want. So the examples of accounts, or the buckets that you have that hold these after tax dollars, could be a taxable brokerage. So a taxable brokerage is just the cash like you have sitting in your checking account that you move over into an investment account. So a taxable brokerage, you put money in, you can take it out at any time, but there's different tax consequences with that, which we'll get into in a minute. The other account that's after tax dollars is what you've probably heard of. It's a common account, is the Roth IRA. Don't get intimidated by the name. It was apparently named after someone named Roth. I don't actually even know the history. Doesn't matter. So your Roth IRA is filled with dollars that you've already paid tax on. So there's different advantages to doing that. But what kind of stinks about that is that you did have to already pay tax on the money that you've made. So there's another path. So what if E Corp just invested or paid your investment directly? So this is known as before tax dollars. So in the first path where you had your paycheck taxed with income tax, the other option is, well, I don't want my income to be taxed. So in this case, E Corp is paying into an account directly versus giving you money in a paycheck. And so you get savings on that. So what are examples of accounts that are before tax dollars? So your 401k, for instance, your employer retirement account is before tax. What does that mean? So it means that every single dollar that you put in into this bucket and this plant does not receive income tax. And so this allows you to quote unquote hide money from the government so that you're not taxed on that money. Another example is a traditional IRA. So, unlike the Roth IRA that we talked about in the first example, a traditional IRA can actually be done before tax, meaning that you actually have a tax incentive right now to put money into it. And that is in certain situations at certain income levels, which we'll get into in a minute here. So, you have two paths. So, you have your money that's taxed from your company. After tax dollars, it's your money. You can do what you want with it when you want with it, but you pay income tax now. Then you have another option where you're not taxed and you're able to avoid taxes now, but there's some drawbacks to that. And so let's get into the different options. Okay, so now let's look at all of these accounts all together so that we can talk about which accounts to use. Because again, these are just buckets. Don't get distracted by all the names. They hold your investments. But there are different rules for these different accounts that impact how the money is taxed. And really, at the end of the day, this is all it's about how do I manage my taxes so that I can keep more of my money so I can build wealth. So let's look at the money that goes into these accounts first. So your 401k and your traditional IRA come in before tax. So that's your company paying these accounts and you not having to pay tax on that income. You'll notice I did a yellow check mark on the traditional IRA. So if you make under $77,000 a year as an individual, then you can take advantage of not paying income tax on your paycheck when you put money into a traditional IRA. A Roth IRA, you already pay tax on. These dollars you can kind of think of as more expensive because you've already paid tax, but there's advantages that we'll go through in a minute here. And then there's a health savings account. And a health savings account is incredible because you don't pay tax on it going in, you don't pay tax while it's growing, and you never pay tax when the money's coming out. So it's what you'll hear called triple tax advantage. But all of these have withdrawal rules of when you can get the money out, why you can get the money out. Whereas a taxable brokerage, which again is just the money sitting in your checking account that you decide to invest, you can withdraw at any time, but you've already paid tax on it. So then let's look at what happens as money is growing inside of these accounts. So your retirement accounts are pretty incredible. So whether it's a 401k, a traditional IRA, a Roth, or a health savings account, you're not paying tax on any of the growth. So whether let's say you harvest a plant in one of these buckets, which is your investment, and you put a new plant in, you're not paying tax on any of the money or the gain on that investment, and you're never paying tax on any of the income that your investments have paid, which, if you remember, we talked about earlier was a dividend. But what happens with the money growing inside a taxable account? So kind of stinks because you do pay tax on any gains that you sell. So let's say you put money into an investment, it does well, and then you decide to sell that investment and then just use the money. You're going to pay tax on the gain of your investment. You're also going to pay tax anytime that there's income generated. So even if you don't sell your investments, so if you have an investment that creates income for you, you're going to pay tax if it's within a taxable brokerage account. And so this is where you have to be careful. You'll hear a lot about, oh, I'm a dividend investor, which can be great in retirement. But if you're building wealth right now, you're going to pay tax on that income that's kind of being forced on you. And so that could raise the tax that you're paying every single year and be a harm to you when you don't actually need that income yet. So you have to be really thoughtful about what investments you have in your taxable brokerage account. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens to the dollars once you start taking money out of these accounts. So for your retirement accounts, you're going to pay tax when you're finally ready to withdraw money from them in your 401k or your traditional IRA. And that's because you didn't pay tax in the here and now. So if you're avoiding the tax on your income now in these accounts, they're going to tax it when it's coming out. As opposed to a Roth IRA, you paid tax when you first started investing, but now you're going to not pay tax on the money coming out. So this can be a great stress relief for people because with a Roth IRA, they never have to worry about taxes coming out of those accounts. They grow tax free and you're not paying taxes on that growth. Same thing with a health savings account. And a taxable brokerage account, like we already said, anytime you sell an investment, you're going to pay tax on that gain, but then it's your money. So the point is, we want to garden with all of these different buckets working together to build wealth, to avoid as much tax as we can, and then plan around when we need this money. Okay, so you got a brief rundown of taxes on these different accounts. Now, your next question might be, well, which money do I put in which account? I want to water my different buckets. How much money should I put in each one? Which one should I prioritize? So we'll go through the rules of thumb. You don't focus on just one bucket. You can focus on multiple. We want to look at where can we get tax incentives? Where can we take advantage of free money? And then what are the maximums that we can put money into? So let's talk about the 401k first. So first rule for me of a 401k is you should always meet the employer match maximum. So please put this on your checklist of things to do. Talk to your employer. You can look at their HR website or their benefits and figure out how much money they give you for every dollar that you put into a 401k. So if the match is really great, you may want to prioritize putting as much money into your 401k as possible because they're going to give you free money for every dollar that you put in. They match your money. In addition to free money, like we talked about earlier, it's before tax money. So you avoid tax on the dollars that go into your 401k. So it has two advantages: free money from your employer, free money from the government that's growing tax free. Now, the question is, well, how much money can I put in these accounts before tax every year? Well, it's $23,000. Now, $23,000 is a ton of money, and you might not be able to invest that much money every single year in just this one account. So the question is, well, how much money should I put in? Always go up to the employer match. That's going to be free money from your employer, and it's going to give you the tax benefit. Now, there are challenges with the 401k. Your 401k is managed by your employer. And so while all of these other accounts, which I'll show you, can be opened from the brokerage we picked out, which is your garden box, your 401k is typically managed by your company. So you might not have control over where this money sits. The other challenge is sometimes 401ks can have high fees. So there's a fee for managing these accounts. And sometimes the investments you can choose from are limited. So there's some nuance to a 401k that I'll get into in a future video, but at a rule of thumb, look at the employer match maximum and try to hit that number. And then if you can keep going, you can go up to the $23,000. Okay, so you hit your employer match. Now you're going to look at your next bucket in this garden, which is your Roth IRA or your traditional IRA. And you have another decision here. So you can invest up to $7,000 a year. So if you earn under $77,000 a year and you put money into a traditional IRA, you can get money back on your annual taxes. So this can be a great way to pay yourself to save and invest and build wealth if you're under that income limit. The disadvantage, like we said, is when you take that money out, eventually you're going to pay tax on whatever you take out, as opposed to a Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA, you've already paid tax on those dollars, but it's going to grow tax free. One important thing about a Roth is the money that you contribute. So the contributions, your own money, you can actually take that money out of a Roth IRA back to yourself at any point. So there's no restriction on when you can take that money. Now, you can't take the money that grows or the investment. So think about like a plant that's fruiting. You can't take the fruit off of that investment, but you can take the money back that you've put in for yourself. So for a new investor, the cool thing about a Roth is that you can access the money at any time. While I would never recommend that you actually take money out of a Roth, it can be a peace of mind to know, especially as you're early in your journey, that if you needed to take that money out, you could. And that was a great way to convince myself when I was starting to actually put money in, because I was always scared that I wasn't going to have enough money when I wasn't earning a lot and I was in debt about investing early. And so I was able to kind of overcome that in myself by putting money into a Roth, knowing that if I needed that money, I could take it and I wouldn't have to worry about any restrictions. All right, so you can put $7,000 into either of these accounts. And oh, by the way, the last day that you can do this for 2024 is actually coming up. So you can put money into these accounts by April 15th of every year for the year prior. So if you have not opened one of these accounts and you wanted to start investing, even if it was 10 bucks, 100 bucks, a little bit of money, you can put money in as long as you do it by April 15th. Now, if you put money in by April 15th and you have a traditional IRA and you've already filed your taxes, you can amend your taxes. And what that means is that you're going to get more money back from the government because those are before tax dollars. They're going to pay you back the tax that they've had on your income. All right, next up, after your Roth or traditional IRA, you have another option. You could also put in over $4,000 in a health savings account. These are incredible because you don't pay tax on the money going in, you don't pay tax on the money that's growing, and you never pay tax on the money that's coming out. And you could actually convert these accounts to a traditional IRA at 65 or over. And if you're older, you can actually use this money to cover Medicare premiums. So the way I think about a health savings account is a bucket that is far into the future that I'd never touch and I just let it grow because of the advantages it has in taxes. But the cool thing is that if you ever need it for a health emergency, that money is your coverage for your medical expenses. And then the last one that everyone has access to is a taxable account. So it's money you've already paid tax on. You're going to pay tax on income on it, and you're going to pay tax when you sell if you sell at a profit. But it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it, and it's growing for you. So I would always encourage you, put as much money as you can. But if you look at all of these, this is about $34,000 in tax advantaged money in one way or the other that you can prioritize. And again, $34,000 of retirement savings is a lot. A lot of people will never get there. It's aspirational, and you can kind of use these as rules of thumb to start building your garden. The biggest thing I would challenge you on is if you're a wealth builder and you're trying to get onto this money journey, one, don't burn yourself out by trying to save too much, but also understand that you can challenge yourself by continuing to kind of up the investment in yourself with these different accounts. Okay, so you are well on your way to becoming your own money monk. And I want to go back to the start of this video where we talked about this analogy. So at this point, you have your brokerage picked out. It's your raised garden bed, and you've got a pretty good idea of the different buckets that can go inside of this brokerage. And so it's your retirement accounts and your non-retirement accounts. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about the investments that go into your bucket. So you can think about this garden. You've tilled the soil, you've built the box, you put the soil in, you have your money ready to go to invest, and you're ready to plant the seeds. But there's a lot that goes into picking the seeds that needs to grow in these buckets. And so I don't want to overwhelm you in one super long video. But before you leave, I want to talk about how you can actually open these accounts. And so I'm going to show you this on my web browser. Okay, so let's say you're ready to open the buckets inside of your garden bed. I'm going to say I chose Fidelity as my garden bed, and I want to open these different buckets. So literally just do an internet search health savings account and the name of the brokerage. So it doesn't have to be Fidelity, Vanguard, all of these other companies. They have these accounts available to you. So I can open a health savings account here, and you just walk through the account opening steps. If you already have an account with your brokerage, you can just easily add it to your existing account. So that's a health savings account. Up here is a Roth IRA. So again, if you're interested in doing a Roth, you can click open Roth. A traditional IRA, open a traditional IRA. And then again, a taxable brokerage, which is money you have like in your checking account that you move into one of these buckets to invest. You can open up a brokerage, it's free. But really, you open your garden box by just setting it up online, just like you would like a Netflix account, and it's there. And then you can add each of these, and then you can start contributing. So you set up a transfer from your bank, and you are well on your way to building your investing garden. All right, so you now have your foundation set for your garden, and now it's all about figuring out what seeds you're going to plant in that garden. And so I hope this information has been helpful to you. My bulldog is now fully asleep behind me. I will be coming out with part 2 around picking your investments either this week or next week. If you haven't signed up yet, you can sign up for my newsletter at my website. I'll typically talk about the things that I'm going to release a video on early. So if you want a heads up on things that are coming or access to the free tools, feel free to visit my website. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If it's been helpful, A like or a subscribe tells me that it's beneficial and it keeps the YouTube algorithm recommending my content. And since this video is really dedicated to brand new wealth builders, I'm really looking forward to your success on this journey. And I will have the investing video out in the not too distant future.